Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Power of Eight Book Club. Hello, I am your co-host today, Pollyanna Blanco, along with Jennifer Smith, and we're back here to talk about The Power of Eight by Lynne McTaggart. We're actually up to chapter 20 now. It's hard to imagine how quickly it's gone by, and today's chapter is all about a year of intention. And it's a fascinating chapter because it really is anecdotal story after anecdotal story of people who started to participate in these Power of Eight groups and how their lives transformed as a result of saying yes to joining these groups. And I'm just going to mention this right at the very beginning of our episode today because we have a landing page, if you haven't already checked it out, at meetthelight.com, where you can go and volunteer to be one of the people who receives the blessings of a Power of Eight group and to be a participant. And so if you're curious, again, it's at meetthelight.com /Power of Eight. Is that correct, Jennifer?
That's correct. Yep. The power of
Okay,
eight. Yes.
awesome. Yeah, definitely. And also, too, if you happen to be watching live, a little later in the show, we're going to be asking you to share, your questions, your thoughts, and any ahas you're receiving from today's episode. Or I know some of you have been watching more than one episode, and we thank you for that, because this whole episode is really, because of the chapter, dedicated to the power of transformational healing through the power of intention. And, what stood out for me at the beginning of this chapter was how many concerns and issues the very first woman had in the story that was shared first. And she had multiple things when she went into the Power of Eight group. She had physical health concerns. She wanted help with her relationships with her stepmother and her stepchildren. And she wanted to start training regularly. And she had a long laundry list of different things that she wanted to focus on transforming. And then what happened was, as it often happens for us in situations like these, there's that unexpected moment that catches your attention. And it was a couple of lumps in her breasts and in one of her breasts. And basically at that moment in time, that became the focus of the group. And what was, I think, so fascinating, and that's why I want to kind of lead with that example, because there's so many in here, is that I think it's very relatable. Oftentimes when we sort of have the opportunity to say yes to really receiving healing, all these things can pop up. We think, oh, I want to fix this and this and this and this and this. But what was so fascinating is that when she focused on the one area, which was healing the lumps in her breast, then everything that was on her original list of areas in her life that she wanted to improve through the process, which we talked about last time as healing being a process, she actually managed to transform those areas too. And so this goes back to the importance of having a clear focus and having patience and trusting the process. So that's just where I want to lead with. Jennifer, what
Mhm.
stood out for you in this chapter?
I love how you introduced that because having that focused intention of how you see things to be, how you want them to be. In this case, it was health related. But typically, whenever we are able to raise our conscious awareness, raise our vibration to a higher level, we'll see that many other things just fix themselves on their own as well. And that's what I love about that. When you and even whenever we are going throughout our day, and I even use this with my family, is focus on that you want. But if something's happening right now in this reality, what we call reality in the physical plane, is to especially like at nighttime, like don't focus on that problem that you're having. Pick something in your life that's going really well and think about that, because if you're just raising your vibration thinking about that, the other things will raise too. So it's really fascinating.
That's a great point. It's so true because sometimes, again, has to do with our default in our brain, right?
Mhm.
We're overriding that programming. So focusing on what you want to create and what is going well already. It's what already exists is really
Yeah.
the key. Yeah.
Which is like the gratitude, right? It's the same as gratitude, like really focusing on what's going well and being grateful for that, which increases your vibration, which helps your whole
Definitely.
life.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, what I loved about the chapter was, the author said, "Okay, she's done these Power of 8 studies, she's recorded them, she's given the information out, but she wanted to see what really happens if there was a Power of 8 team put together," and she put together multiple teams, and they stayed together for a year. So every Friday, she would kinda give them instructions on what to do, and every 10 weeks, she would get together and see how everybody was doing. And I thought that was, really, really a great exercise because if you continue with, your intentions of the good, in a longer time frame, that allows more things to come into your life, that good that you want into your life. So I thought it was a great way to see how does this really work. And this chapter really just went through all of the different stories of the participants and how their life improved. So it was really from them. What were they focusing on? What improved? There was a lot about health that we know, from the energy, energy healing, positive intention standpoint. Um, there were things with relationships, with careers, with people finding their life purpose, going to something purposeful work for them than what their current career was. So there was lots of many wonderful stories throughout this chapter.
Definitely. I think this is a great chapter too. If someone, I don't know about you, but sometimes people I know have a habit of jumping ahead in books and kind of like skipping over certain chapters. So I would say this is the perfect chapter to do that with. If you start to read it and you just want to find out what kinds of transformations are possible with these groups, I would say this is the chapter to jump ahead into.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it gives all sorts of examples. There was one thing in here that I have highlighted because I thought, oh, that's really good. Because I think you and I read this and we go, well, of course that happens. Yes, that's what happens, right? I mean, we know this. But I love it that it's in this book and that people can read it. But this is on page 205. And one of the quotes was from a participant. He said, the most profound effect on himself occurred whenever he held an intention for someone else, which we
Mhm.
talked about last week. And then it's just he in quotes, "It just feels like there's more good fortune that comes my way," he said. "Something in me feels more central, more grounded, more hooked up, like a conduit to spirit," which is exactly what's happening. The con Like a conduit to spirit, and I love that.
That was a great quote. I had that underlined too. I loved how he expressed that
Mhm,
because when we allow like the divine into our lives, when we feel that connection, we are divine beings in human
mhm.
form. And I feel it's like almost like a homecoming, right? When we have these experiences that reconnect us with that. And so that's a great quote. I like that. The other thing too that caught my attention is just before that on page 204 was another person who was sharing, what I have noticed is that the intentions continue to fuel my efforts for healing. In other words, I've given my word, put my word intention out there, and it fuels my follow through. And so I like the idea that, it's like you build that positive momentum. So it's like
Mhm.
by focusing on the one thing and you see results and you see transformation and you see shifts, it's encouraging that, oh my goodness, if this is possible, what else is possible?
Yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah. And from that example, the groups, you know it's like you're accountable to someone. You put your intention out there. Now you got to show up each week with a group of 8 people, And what actions have you put into this accountability of what you want? And there was something that came in for people. Like, we don't always know how things are going to happen. You just have to know that they are going to happen. And then you become aware of how it comes into you. Also on page 204, this was Patty, who had lots of many great things come to her. She was trying to, her intentions were to improve her relationships with her stepchildren. And she says, it's like my group helped me to manifest the perfect house for our family. So a house that was large and that was near some of her stepchildren. So that wasn't a specific request out there, but it certainly came in that fulfilled the request she was looking for.
Yeah, it's amazing how it all comes together. You know, a lot of it's about sort of allowing ourselves, and we were talking about this last time too, to be in that flow state
Mhm.
where we're in that, receptive mode. And in order to get into that receptive mode, it starts with the giving mode, and because we're always constantly sending and receiving energy, it's a feedback loop, right? So
Mhm.
depending on what kind of energy we're sending and putting forward will determine the kind of energy we're receiving back. And this is I think where sometimes it's so powerful when people realize that it's such a simple shift of just remembering that it doesn't have to be complicated. It can actually be quite simple, and healing can even be instantaneous. Sometimes just the remembrance of that in the moment is like the turning on the light switch, and it's like, oh, okay. you know
Mhm.
and a big part I feel of healing too is, and you've shared this so many times too, Jennifer, is, and even at the start you mentioned too about focusing on something that's already going well, that makes you happy, because it really is about um, perspective taking and reframing how we choose
Mhm.
to look at things. It's I like to go back to that, the quote that we both know from our teachers, Sri Ramka and Master Lady Kira, about what we invited this to be
Mhm.
with curiosity rather than with confusion. I think those are the two poles, right? Can have confusion, which can create a focus on the problem and going into overanalysis and overwhelm, or we can shift into curiosity. And um, and I think the only reason why sometimes people don't shift into curiosity is because of the fear, doubt, and hesitancy, right? Because that's the part of the brain that is, you know, it's like our primitive brain. It's that reptilian brain. It's just what it does. As we expand our consciousness, then it becomes easier to shift into curiosity, which is where our creativity lies. And when we're creative, we can start to look at, an opportunity like joining a Power of Eight group and being curious. I wonder if that would work for me. Like, even just being open. I wonder
Mhm.
if maybe my sciatica would improve a little bit. I wonder if, my relationship with my partner might become calmer, or more harmonious, or if we could agree more often on what to do for dinner on Friday nights, or, like,
That seems to be a common thing for people, right? What are we gonna do for dinner?
yeah, food is always one of those topics, right?
Yeah.
So, just starting with little inroads, right? Whereas, so I feel like this is the bridge almost, if you will. And I just feel compelled to share that right now after everything you've shared, because there is such a great opportunity here waiting for you. If you're listening to this right now and you've been
Mhm.
following more than one episode of what we've been sharing, is to trust yourself and to listen to yourself and to be open to the possibilities. There's a reason why you're watching this. There's a reason why you're drawn to this topic. And to honor that part of you that is curious, to honor that part of you that wonders what is possible and available for you, you know. And the great thing is that as we take these, I like to call them baby steps, in the sense that, like, we don't have to go 0 to 60. Then little by little, when we experience positive momentum like this chapter is showing, it's so encouraging. And then this is how over time, and I love that she gave it a year too, because I think sometimes it's when we've been relying on coping mechanisms, we want
Mhm.
the quick fix, right? When we're talking about transformation and embracing transformation, it's we start to respect that it's a process and to look at those. And I think it's a blessing that it's a process too, because those little incremental positive shifts and gains are not overwhelming. See, I think this is why it
Yeah.
happens that way too. So our mind of form doesn't go into like overwhelm, and we're better able to say, oh, well, that was manageable. That feels better, and kind of keep building on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to say too that for the Power of 8 groups, if someone is interested in doing that with us, because I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
You can see how much good it can do for everyone, right? Including ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, that this is gonna be offline, so it's not like we're gonna be in front of people doing this Power of 8 group, just to make that clear. So it's going to be, very private, and of course, we would welcome anybody if they wanted to come on a podcast and talk about it. We certainly can talk about those experiences, but it's not expected of people to do that.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Jennifer. I think we haven't made that as clear as in past
Yeah.
episodes, and, yes, definitely, it is gonna be a private Zoom, and yeah, that's good great point that you shared.
Yeah, just in case that's,
Yeah.
discouraging anyone who wants to join, it'll be private. It's respect everybody's privacy. It just be the group of 8 that will be meeting,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Any other stories that stuck out to you in this? I mean, they're all wonderful.
They are, and they again, it's the amount of detail that, they go into. Um, well, on page 209, it's more just what caught my attention were the responses to the experience of the transformation, where there was a person talking about just the comment. It may seem like ordinary experiences, but they weren't, said Joanne. Many synchronous moments occurred, giving us what we needed exactly when we needed it, as we enjoyed
Mhm.
the totally positive connection with people we met. We felt safe even when we were lost at night. And she was talking about a journey that she was on. But again, it's that power of, you know, being able to connect to other people and to really um, get into that flow state where you have that sense of everything's unfolding as it is
Mhm.
meant to. I'm stuttering here because it's like I'm like stumbling over my words. Um, there is such a peace that comes from witnessing and experiencing that, just that
Mhm.
allowing that we talked about last time.
Yeah.
And it's so reassuring to us because she talked about safety too. When we're having experiences where we feel connected to something larger than ourselves, that divine presence, that healing intention, and we know that there are other people amplifying it in a group with and for us, then that in that way we go into that sense of unity consciousness. We join forces with that. We become
Mhm.
that. We live as that. And that's so restorative. So that stuck out for me.
Yeah, well, what I loved about that story, and it's about Joanne traveling, and she had the, Power of 8 group was sending intentions for her. So she was in total complete trust that everything would work out just fine whenever she traveled overseas and did not book a lot of things, and she was just gonna be spontaneous to what came her way. And I thought that was courageous. People have a hard time doing that.
Mhm.
That bravery, just being courageous and just knowing. And whenever you know, you just know. And that's exactly how her trip was. There was all sorts of upgrades and hotel rooms and getting rides here and getting rides there and that creates a flowing day, and it seems magical. Everything just flows in perfect order, right? But it's really that knowing and not doubting. And
Yeah.
We all can do this. We all can do this.
And you know, I almost see it as because one of the things I see people struggle with, and at one point I really struggled with it a lot too before I was really conscious of it. And it's still something that from time to time I have to really be mindful of, right? Because growing up, you know, I was someone who put a lot of pressure on myself to do well at school and do well at whatever I, you know, participated in.
Mhm.
And that became internalized as sort of an inner critic, right? I feel like I want to bring that up. And so, you know, oftentimes people can be far kinder to other people than they are to themselves, like the way they
Mhm.
internally speak to themselves. And so when you have someone, you know, holding that intention for you to expect the best, to have smooth travels, and you trust in that, it's almost like a scaffolding in a way
Mhm.
that, you know, have someone else having your back. And then when you go through the process of trusting that and allowing that into your life, it's scaffolding and modeling for you to discover it within yourself, so that as you move through life, it's like I know what it feels like is like to have my own back.
Mhm. And what a gift that is to people, just encouraging them and holding an intention for them because they themselves also have to have that same intention. But just having that support from people. I mean,
For sure.
that's a gift that we can give other people, right? And that's what we should be doing.
Exactly. And you know, and why would we not do it? You know, it's this is the funny thing. And again, this is the paradigm shift. As you were saying that, I was thinking, well, this is the new earth. This is where we celebrate each other, we champion each other. It's not competitive, it's collaborative. And
Mhm.
this is what it looks like is like in practice, you know? And it's not too good to be true. It's happening. People are choosing this, you know, and every time somebody else chooses to do this, it's reaffirming, it's feeding the field, it's nourishing the field that is,
Mhm.
you know, raising the vibration on the planet and shifting us into a tipping point collectively where this is the new normal. So if you'd like to feed the field with this, to know and trust on
Mhm.
with every fiber of your being that this is an actual way to exist, be, and live in life, then what a wonderful way to practice it and put your vote in for it.
Right. That's reminding me of one of the ensoulments. It was from the Ascended Life Ensoulments, where there was a line in there that says, "Just imagine if every person you met, they greeted you with kindness and you greeted them with kindness, like this true, authentic kindness. How would a world like that look?" Right? That's what we're talking about. That's,
Yeah,
yeah,
I love
sounds
that.
great to me.
I'd vote for that world too.
Yeah, me too. I'll put my vote in for that.
Was there
Okay,
anything?
yeah,
Oh,
there
go
was
ahead,
one
the
more
other one.
line I have outlined here, and it said, it's on page 210, and it says one of the participants' name was Karen, and it says, "Karen was overwhelmed by the loving vibes of the group coming to her in waves."
Oh, that's nice.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. When you can actually when you can actually give yourself permission to feel as opposed to always be thinking your way through life,
Mhm.
to feel into that connection, to to be aware of yourself as an energy being, even noticing yourself and the energy that you're experiencing around, acknowledging that part of your experience. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And that's how it feels too when you feel that good energy coming in. It's like the coming to her in waves. Yeah, I love that. So I had to highlight that one.
You know what that just brought up for me is that when the mind of form, when you have enough of these positive experiences, the mind starts to relax, right? Because
Mhm.
it feels so good. It doesn't have to work as hard to figure everything out to keep you safe, right? And I've had experiences like that where I've noticed my mind has been calmer when I've been around good energy people where
Mhm.
I trust myself and I trust everyone around me that it's safe and it's everyone has positive intentions, good intentions, and we're on the same page, so to speak, you know, like, and it's not about necessarily even agreeing necessarily about minutia, but just we have a common intent or common goal, you know, a way that is sort of showing up for each other, right? And that is so rebalancing, where the mind can calm down. It doesn't have to get stuck in overwhelm and overthinking. And so just the fact that she said she was feeling waves of that connection is,
Mhm.
I think for so many people in living fast-paced, busy lives, you know, the default mode is thinking, being in thinking mode, right?
Yeah.
And less in feeling mode, because if you ask people what they're feeling, sometimes it's they don't even know, right? And yet these experiences, because they're so out of that perhaps habitual way of being, can be pattern interrupts as well too, because you experience something, you've opened yourself to it, you're curious about it because it sort of seems outside of your day-to-day way of being, and then you have that experience and you're like, oh, I want more of this.
Mhm. What you described, I was reading a book, and one of the participants, it was like the participants would ask a question, it was on the book, and then the teacher would answer. And one of the participants said, they didn't understand, like, what do you mean about being aware? Give us an example. I'm not, they weren't quite getting it. And the teacher said, well, it's kind of like if you were sitting in a restaurant and and you were thinking about something, you have your mind engaged, really thinking about something, and someone comes and taps you on the shoulder, and then you're startled because you weren't aware that they were there. But if you were just in the present and in the now, your intuition would pick up. You would already know that someone's coming behind you. So
Yes.
I thought, oh, that's a great explanation that might kind of bridge that to people who may wonder, like, what are they talking about? Because I don't know who's all on here. Everybody may know what we're talking about. I don't know, but I thought that was a great example.
That's an interesting example, and it makes a lot of sense because, you know, our
Because he
capacity.
because he said that you're so inside of yourself thinking that you're not aware of the stuff that's going on. But if you disengage the mind a little bit and just be present, you can have that awareness of everything that's going on around you.
You know which word is coming to my mind as you say that? Attunement. Like that attunement, being attuned to your environment.
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
very intuitive too, because it's that you're very much using all aspects of your being. You know, you're noticing the sensations, you're noticing your body, you're noticing beyond your physical you're open, right? So in that way, you can uh, just feel attuned, connected,
Mhm.
because you talked about being inside of yourself, kind of using only kind of one channel of information to receive
Right.
feedback, whereas you have,
Mhm.
well, multidimensional presence. That's what multidimensional presence is. It's being
Mhm.
tuned in, tapped in to all kinds of feedback simultaneously, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing. It's, you know, when you think about all these smart TVs now, and you can have like different. I mean, my TV's not like that, and I don't watch much TV, but I've seen them before where you can have different screens playing at the same time, or even if you think about a Zoom meeting and you have all these different screens on the same screen, it's the same kind of um, sort of the same kind of idea where you can have multiple stations that you're receiving feedback from at the same time,
Yeah.
and it's how can you be open and present simultaneously? Well, that comes with that really being still and being open, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So that's all I had really underlined for this one. Um, did you want to talk about the and more, or what happened, like, during the week?
Sure. I was just going to make one more comment from the book that I had underlined. It was
Mhm.
just another one of the comments. I was really kind of noticing the comments more than like focusing on the details of each person's experience. Someone named Mitchell Dean, this is on page 214, said, I've made more progress in the last year than in the 44 years prior by a lot, he said in an interview. So much so that I finally moved into healing some other issues as the primary health goal, and those are moving already too. And it talked about how he overcame writer's block um, and his life just started to unfold from there. And it's I just kind of wanted to touch on that because it's the idea of going back to the time factor again. Some people may think, oh, it was a whole year, and yet in 44 years he accomplished more in that year than in 44 years. So time is relative, right? When we're looking at these things, like sometimes
Mhm.
if people ask themselves, well, how long has this been going on for me? And I've been wanting to shift and transform it. Sometimes when we actually look at the number of years that something has been taking up mental, emotional real estate, in our being, and then we look at a commitment to a certain period of time to be open to shifting it, it's that's the miracle in and of itself, is that it doesn't it might happen literally in the moment, but the moment could also be a year, which is a lot shorter than 44 years. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how it all
A
plays out.
Yeah, and the shift can happen very quickly, and it's all about how we engage our mind. So as soon as we can let go of the old story and move into the new story of what we want and keep in that positive, uh, frame of mind, then it can happen like that, or it can take longer. It really depends on, um, it depends on each individual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks. I just wanted to toss that in there. So the and more piece, if I don't know if do you want to lead with that? What stood out for you this week about and more?
Well, the and more. So, I'm in Illinois, and we could see the Northern Lights
Oh, wow.
on October 10th from Illinois, which this happened several months ago too. Only remember this happening just twice this year. I don't remember it happening any other time. Perhaps it did, um, but it was big for me this year. Um, but I didn't realize that the Northern Lights would be visible, so I didn't see them. But that night, whenever woke up at like 2 a.m., and then I went into like a meditation. It was a wonderful meditation through the energetic realms. And then the next morning, I woke up and saw everybody's Facebook posts on all these wonderful, beautiful pictures of the Northern Lights. And I thought, oh, well, that's what it was. And I journaled about it, and I realized that was on 1010, which is also
Oh,
a portal
wow.
day.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yes, of course. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's amazing.
Yes, and it was, yeah, so that came in this week, and that was, uh, quite magical. I just write things down because I get information, but I don't always know what it means at the time. Um, but what I did see is, um well, the beginning was, like, me talking with people and just saw fireworks, so it's to me, that meant, "Oh, that's, like, the dreamy state, and that's wonderful, and that's great." But you've gotta get your feet on the ground and go do some action. And whenever I stood up to go walk into a building that I saw, my legs were like it was hard to stand up,
Oh,
you know?
interesting. Yeah.
And, but I did. And then I walked into a building, and in that building, the first section was like a hospital.
Mhm.
And what I noticed on the counter was a motor. I come from the motor industry, so that was, I worked for a motor company for about 7 years, the largest motor company in the world. But on this counter was a motor. It was the name of, another motor company, and when I went to look at it and I picked up what it was like a future motor that was coming. It was in the hospital, a future motor from this company. And, I was really trying to look at the design to see what is this, you know? Um, and then I walked into the other building, and then whenever I came back, then it was like I was back to the normal life, because then all the motors are transformed back to what a normal induction motor would be. So it's like, to me, that was like you're shifting dimensions within that meditation, which is showing me, yeah, it's really that easy. You just got to shift. You just got to keep, you know, up leveling your consciousness. So things that are already, it's already there. These things are already there. You
Yes.
know, they're already invented. So I thought that was really interesting. So writing it down, and we'll see what that comes to be. So yeah, that was good. How about you? Did you have anything happen?
I feel like there have been things that have been happening, and I like the idea of writing them down because sometimes I don't write them down, and uh, but definitely like there was a flow this weekend, and it was interesting because I know what you're saying too about shifting dimensions and noticing like there's things can happen very quickly now depending on where our focus and attention is, and I remember there was a license plate. I'm trying to remember what it said on it because normally I do remember that, but in the moment I remember thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is so, clear as a message." But for some reason, I'm not remembering it right now. But I know this weekend I had a chance. I said yes to going to a wonderful dance congress, a salsa congress, because I love to
Mm,
dance.
mhm.
I did some like pro am semi competitive ballroom dance sport dance for 13 years. And last year I went to the Congress and I sort of learned from that experience about the driving situation, everything. And I committed this year that I was going to go and just stay overnight to make it easy and just so I could stay and dance because I love to dance after the show. They have a wonderful Saturday night show. So I met up with a good friend of mine who came in. I'm in Toronto. She came in from Mississauga and we met up to watch the show and then visited afterwards. And then I stayed on to dance.
Mm.
But it was like the hotel itself, like everything went so smoothly. Like even in terms of booking the hotel, I put out to the in advance, I put out to the universe, I had some points. And when I looked at the price at one moment, it was one price. And I was like, oh, I don't want to pay that much. And I had an idea in mind of how much I wanted to pay. I let it go. And then I went back a few days later. And then the price was the price that I was thinking about. And so that manifested. And then,
So you should have went lower. You should have went
yeah,
lower at that
probably.
point.
Just being too conservative of like,
Yeah.
see, this is where you baby steps, right? You learn. And then I parked at the hotel, which was I don't usually do valet parking, but it was just the convenience because that's really all they have. And and it was kind of uncanny because the gentleman who parked my car, he was joking. He said, "My name's Polly too," like because he has sort of a Italian accent, and
Mhm.
and uh, and so that was kind of that that tickled my funny bone, just the sort of synchronicity of that, and how welcoming he was and how helpful he was. And then I had asked for, if I could get a bar fridge in the room. And I remember them saying that uh, all the people at the Congress had asked for the same kind of thing, a bar fridge. So they said, no problem at all. You can just use the mini bar fridge and just take a few things that will put a note on your file not to charge you. And so again, just everything went smoothly. Like like at the end, they're like, "We trust you. Don't worry. If you didn't take anything, we
Mhm.
believe you didn't take anything." Like it was just easy button. And then even I feel like there were a few other things. Like it felt like things were just flowing and it was like one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. It was easy. I got got great seats, and then there was also just the next day. Like even I can't think of anything else specific right now. I'm sorry. It's been a busy day at work.
Yeah.
um,
But I
but
love
yeah,
that.
just
I love
the
the
feeling
days
of
that are
flow,
in I
right?
love the
Yeah,
days that are in the flow, because that just
yeah.
feels so good. And it just happens, right? So, yeah. you had mentioned TV and not watching much of it. I don't watch much TV either, but I do have a subscription to Gaia
Yes,
channel, right?
I do, yes.
And so last night I was watching this show about crystals, and I have this quartz crystal here that
Oh,
someone
let's get
gifted
a translate
me.
that.
I don't know if you can see it. There we go. But I was given that, and this it's just so funny how things happen, like the synchronicities of things. And he told me it was one of my relatives' friends, and I was at his house because he has all of these. Well, it's these geodes.
Oh, those are nice. Yeah, beautiful.
Geodes. And my relative, whenever I was walking around their house, I noticed that it felt like there was a wall of energy whenever I walked down their sidewalk. So I looked down and I saw these rocks that were lining the sidewalk. And then I realized, oh, there's crystals inside of there. Those are geodes. So I went in to tell them, did you know that those are geodes, that there's crystals inside? And like, well, one of them cracked open and there's some shiny things in there. So
Oh,
they didn't really know, like they didn't have it there purposely because of the energy. They just like the rocks, you know? So they introduced me to the guy, where they went and got the geodes out of this creek. And so this guy gifted me this crystal. That's how I got it. And I knew it was a special crystal. And so I've had it for many months, and I just keep it because I'm like, I know there's something with that. Last night I was watching, and this is why I journal all the time too. One of my manifestations, they were showing me like just a bunch of crystals. It was like hands right in my face, and it was showing me. I'll try to demonstrate this because I knew I was going to talk about this today. Whenever I was thinking about things, and it was like hands like this, and it had like, can you see that? The quartz, like all these rough quartz crystals. And I kept getting flashed that in my meditations. And see, these are the things you get shown, but you don't really know what they mean. So I just write them down. So that was probably in July because I remember I was on vacation whenever I had that meditation and those images flashed to me. So then I just try to piece everything together. Well, last night I'm watching Gaia TV, and I'm watching it about crystals. And there was a Cherokee Indian on there, and it was talking about cleansing. There's all sorts of information on Gaia TV. I mean, you can get on there and learn anything you want to. But he was talking about how to clean crystals and how to charge them. And as soon as you get a crystal, you should clear it because it also has a consciousness. In any situation it's been through, it's got those imprints on it. So you need to clear it whenever you get it. He had talked about if a crystal is gifted to you, that is very sacred, and that crystals is yours. And there are crystals store information, and it's your job to really understand what information has been stored. So now I'm super excited, and I really resonated with the way the Cherokees cleared the crystals. So what was coming into my mind was they use gray sea salt
Oh,
to clear
interesting.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, gray sea salt. And he was he's like, that's the only way you can do it. Now, I've learned differently. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take the shaman and earth approach of clearing the crystal with gray sea salt, which I have some coming on the way. So I can do this. And then I'm also going to use how I've learned how to clear crystals with more the cosmos, the quantum energy. And go down that path and see where that leads me. But these are all little different things that happen over 6 months time frame where, okay, they mean something, but I don't know what. I feel like I'm getting closer. So that was exciting.
Oh, it's wonderful to follow the breadcrumbs. That's what I like to call it. Like when you notice little things and connecting the dots, that's what makes
Mhm.
life so joyous, right?
Mhm.
I kind of feel like it's like a fable for adults, right? When you start to connect all these little dots together, and
Yes. Yes, sorry about that.
it's well, you know what? We're in the wake too of a very powerful super full moon tomorrow.
Mhm.
And so I've been feeling the energy like I don't know about you. This is the end more part for me. Yesterday I don't usually come home and take a nap. But I felt like I really my body, even it's interesting, my right foot um has I thought at first maybe it's because I was dancing till 4:30 in the morning. That could be a contributing
Late
factor.
night dancing.
Um, because I haven't worn heels, I don't usually wear heels too often anymore. But and at the same time too, I also, I was listening to my body and I was thinking, okay, what's the message? What's my body trying to tell me? And I kept getting this message. It was interesting because I had a bit of a default, sometimes on my way home from work, I like to stop and take a break and read a book. And I kept hearing, no, you need rest, you know,
Mm.
and then my logical mind said, well, maybe because my foot has been a little tender and, it needs some rest. And at the same time, I think my foot is also, this is Pollyanna land. This is how I look at things, right? Because again, the right foot is about the past, and this is a full moon coming up, and it's about really a huge release. This month has been I haven't felt it so much as an emotional month. I've heard other people talking about it as an emotional month in terms of purging emotions. However, I feel like that there is something, it's really about, as you mentioned it earlier when we were talking in this chapter, about really full moons are about completion. And this one in particular, I feel like there's just something that wants to release from the past, and I'm trusting my foot to be like the messenger of that. And so I feel like, again, in following the breadcrumbs, the next step is to slow down, to get more rest, to do the, rest, ice, elevate, all that kind of stuff. And and at the same time, like listen, to have that sort of body talk conversation with my foot and ask it, what wants to be seen and heard, right? And because I noticed the previous week after our show, my feet in general were stiffer. And now this right foot has gotten really loud, and my left foot's like, hey, I'm fine, So like
Mhm.
it's interesting how the body is almost like I want to say an oracle or a pendulum. It has messages just the way the rocks
Oh,
do,
yeah.
you know, and
Absolutely.
and so it's really important, a lot of times we look for band-aids just, it's like, oh, I don't want that discomfort, get rid of it, And yeah, and I can remember when I was a young child getting my wisdom teeth taken out, and I had a sore mouth from it, I had a few different teeth pulled in the same dentist visit. And I was lying on the couch, and I think I may have mentioned this before, but it's always stuck with me. I just had this feeling of let's just rest, let's just breathe through the pain, the waves of the pain. And then I started seeing and sensing green light and using it almost like a green gel to
Mhm.
smooth over any places that were sore. I didn't understand inflammation. I didn't understand complementary colors in art. But now, in hindsight, in terms of how all complementary colors, green neutralizes red, red could be like inflammation. These are sort of in hindsight, how I sort of get curious and look at it. At the time, though, it really worked. I sort of smoothed out the pain by breathing into it, using color, applying color to it, and I healed my the soreness in my mouth remarkably quickly. And then I remember many years later being when I was teaching overseas in Mexico, and there was this beautiful teenager that I was working with, redhead with very fair white skin, and she'd had a terrible burn outside in the sun, and we were waiting to take her to the doctors. And in the interim, to help her, she was very open minded. I made that suggestion. I said, this won't do you any harm. If you're a visual person, you might want to try this and play with it and see how it works for you." And she tried it and she said, "Miss, it's helping. It's really helping."
Mhm.
So it's
Absolutely.
so fascinating, right? So, you know, there's so much to notice. Like, that's why I like that we're doing the and more part, because and I'm glad that we're just talking off the cuff about what we're noticing. And I'm curious, I don't know if there's anyone here who's um, noticing anything that if anyone wants to share what they've been noticing this week themselves, because noticing is really a fun game to play.
It is. Yeah. No comments.
No
No
comments at all.
comments today. No. So,
Well, we encourage you, if this is sort of a new way of, I mean, people notice things all the time. The question is, where are you noticing what you're noticing from? I think that's the question to play with a little bit, right? And I just noticed you disappeared for a second.
I was trying to change some things on the screen here, but
You're playing hide and go seek with me. What me invited this to be. Just being open and curious. Like, when I say, where are we noticing it from? Are we noticing it from our um, that place in us that's fearful or that sees something and makes a story about it? Are we noticing it from something outside of our mind, emotions, thoughts, spirit, or just our consciousness itself? Where are we doing the noticing from? And even noticing, what are we noticing the most? And maybe are there other things that maybe perhaps are happening in our day-to-day lives that we're skipping over, in favor of noticing other things, you know.
mhm. Yeah, that's good. I wanted to go back to the moon really quickly.
Oh, sure, go
So
ahead.
that the full moon is tomorrow, is that right? Is it
That's right,
tomorrow?
yeah.
And it's a lotus moon.
What did you
Do
say,
you
sir?
know it's a lotus moon?
Yes.
Do you know more about that? I know it's a special time, but I don't know all the details around it. What I do know is from my bedroom, I have this sliding glass door where you can walk out into a deck, and the moon shining right on in. And so I'm interested for the moonlight tonight.
Yes, definitely. Oh my goodness. I want to put some of my crystals outside to give them a
Yeah.
moon bath. um, well, this is my interpretation, my take on it, that my sense of the lotus moon is that the lotus flower grows in mud, right? And and if you think about the earthiness of our ancestry, I feel sometimes people call it the hunter's moon too. So it's different, but
Mhm.
it's a very earthy moon in that sense. And it's also at a time of the year when things have come to the fullness, like the fullest of the fullness of the harvest, right? And it's supposed to be sort of a golden orange, which again is our relationships, very sacral chakra, right? And it's a time, I feel like, for forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of others. It's a time to um, really, because if you think about the chakra system, each of our energy centers is a lotus flower, oftentimes as it's represented. So it's this inner blossoming, and each petal is a different, it's an energetic part of that energetic song, different, octave, you know,
Mhm.
um, and so each petal itself is a frequency. And so it's almost like that sense of, where could we possibly still be stuck in the mud, and at the same time, and by stuck in the mud metaphorically, I'm speaking, meaning like what old habits and patterns and habitual ways of being, doing, thinking, seeing, the stories we make up. And oftentimes these can be as well very much connected to ancestral patterns and karma and belief systems. You know, what just wants to be let go of, what wants to be dissolved, what wants to open beyond that, what wants to expand beyond that. And that's that beautiful blossoming, that the nourishment from all of those experiences, it's gotten you to this now moment. So having
Mhm.
gratitude for all of those experiences, and then letting that openness of the lotus, the beautiful lotus flower, allowing it to really open, and letting it seed new possibilities, from its core, from its center. So it's that I see this moon as being very much about, as I feel into it, being very much about the dreams that we have that want to come forward. And at the same time, understanding like that our dreams that want to come forward are here as a result of everything we've been through. They're
Mhm.
not separate from it. So it's a thank you rather than a get rid of the past. It's a thank you for the past. It's led to this moment of fullness and completion. And so it's a full embrace of the past. I feel sometimes when people are letting go of the past, it's almost like a discard. And I feel like what I want to say is I've always seen it as never about really, like, when we dissolve, I like to use the word dissolve rather than letting go, in a sense, because it's this idea of dissolving the the grasp that the past might have on us, and at
Ooh,
the
I
same
like
time
that.
loving it, like embracing it back
Yeah.
into the light. That's how I see it.
I like that. I like how you describe that because I kind of see I see it like that as well. And I feel like full moons really bring to the surface some things that may be unconscious, right? So it's
Yes.
pulling it to the surface. So it could be some patterns, some things that are blocking our dreams. So it's pulled to the surface. You look at it, you forgive it, you release it, you let it go.
Mhm.
And it's now harvesting time, so our dreams can be it's time to harvest our dreams,
Yeah.
right? That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, definitely. I That's beautiful. Yeah, it's so important to love the nourishment that we get from the soil, the fertilizer for the soil, like that part, because that's part of who we are too.
Mhm.
We that without those challenges, those perceived challenges, we wouldn't be in here in this now moment, right? And
Right.
so with these greater dreams for something even better and even more, right?
Mhm.
So, and returning us to
Mhm.
the light, returning us to our fullness. So,
I
yeah,
love that. That is a great note to end the show with.
yeah. I think
So,
time
we're
flies by
we're
so
right
fast.
at an hour. Um, do you have anything else you'd like to add? I wanted just to read this last paragraph here to kind of introduce for next week.
Perfect. Go for it.
Okay. So, at the end here of this chapter, Year of Intention, she says, month by month, the list of extraordinary transformations carried on. I have one last experiment to do, one final peek inside the clock's inner chamber to find the mechanism at the heart of it all. So I have a feeling that chapter 21 is going to go into this, and that is called the Power of Eight study. So we will be here next Wednesday. I hope everyone joins us again, and please check out our website, meetthelight.com/the power of eight. If you'd like to participate in our Power of Eight group, I think it's going to be fruitful for everyone that is involved. Please submit there, and we'll get back to you. And we will be back here next Wednesday again, going over chapter 21 at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I always enjoy our conversations. And thank you to those of you who are watching live and on the replay. We really cherish and appreciate your interest
Mhm.
in what we're sharing with you.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. We'll see you next week.